That is sure one hell of a sunset. They don't make them like that very often. Gorgeous.
Hey, it's me, Joey, only the Caribou Weather Dude, and it is sure sunny inside my place this morning. Woo! Look at that sunshine all over me. I look so bright. So what do I want to talk about today? It's been the sun itself, actually. Well, these sunsets, the sunrises, they've been kind of spectacular the last few days, I've been noticing. And then I started wondering, is this fallout from the Hunga-Ha'pai volcano? I think quite possibly it is. And we have some reason to think that. We'll look at some of that stuff today on The Joey Only Show.
I would like to reference now an article in discoverhumboldt.com called Pacific Volcano Could Lead to Spectacular Saskatchewan Sunsets. Spectacular Saskatchewan Sunset. Spectacular Saskatchewan Sunset. Spectacular Saskatchewan Sunset. Spectacular Saskatchewan Sunsets. They spoke to Dr. James Lee, a professor of geology in the Department of Geological Sciences at the University of Saskatchewan. I think globally this particular eruption probably has only really two relatively minor, small effects, Lee explains. The first one is there will be some disruption to air traffic. The ash plume from this volcano is estimated to be at least 20 kilometers high, he said. Well, it was actually 39. And obviously there's potential damage to aircraft engines as we saw back in 2010 with the Icelandic volcano. Discover Humboldt reports the other impact could be appreciated here in Saskatchewan. Lee pointed out that very tiny particulates ejected into the atmosphere will circulate throughout the globe, and we can expect to see very colorful sunsets over the next few months. On cooling of the climate, he says, the first, of course, is the ash particles themselves, he explains. If there are a lot of ash being ejected into the atmosphere, they can reflect sunlight, and of course, that can cause global cooling. The other way a volcano can cause global cooling is sulfur dioxide released to the atmosphere, combining with water vapor to reflect sunlight. From what we measured so far, Lee explains, it seems that the concentrations of sulfur dioxide are very, very low, and so this won't have much of an effect either. Because of our atmospheric circulation path, volcanic eruptions at sort of mid to high latitudes, well away from the equator, tend to mostly affect only that hemisphere where they occur, such as the southern hemisphere. So for instance, northern hemisphere volcanoes would tend to affect the northern hemisphere more and vice versa. So this one being in the southern hemisphere means that most of the effects will happen in that southern hemisphere. Space.com reports that the ash from the Tonga volcano eruption reached record high altitudes, but cooling is unlikely. Oxford University research fellow Simon Proud said on Twitter, this was the first time volcanic ash had been detected so high in the Earth's atmosphere. So, good reason to suspect that already that very fine particulate is making its way over to British Columbia and giving us some of them sunsets that are so pretty. Entirely reasonable. Based on analysis of data from global weather satellites, our preliminary data for the Tonga volcanic cloud suggests that it reached an altitude of 39 kilometers. That's 24 miles. Proud said, we will refine the accuracy of that in the coming days, but if that's correct, that's the highest cloud we have ever seen. Space.com reports that scientists do not believe this will disrupt the Earth's climate, however.
Mr. Scott, we need more sulfur dioxide.
Despite the insane and apocalyptic proportions of this blast,
I don't have an... Damn it, Jim, I'm a doctor, not a volcanologist.
Which was documented by satellites.
I mean, this bugger almost blew right to space, man.
The amount of ash it contained was relatively small compared to other cataclysmic volcanic eruptions known from the previous centuries.
Ash reflects the sunlight back into outer space, and that would potentially cool a planet, you know.
There just wasn't enough sulfur dioxide.
I'm sorry, that's not enough.
According to preliminary measurements, Tonga released, 400,000 metric tons of sulfur dioxide. That's about 2% of what Mount Pinatubo released in 1991. So a very powerful explosion that didn't necessarily release the sulfur dioxide. The main trigger of the explosion was seawater rushing in, right? Boom! So when you think about what was the trigger for the explosion and what was the after effect, what was released, you can kind of see a correlation there. Karen Rosenloff, an expert in atmospheric chemistry at the U.S. National Atmospheric and Oceanic Administration, NOAA, told Space.com in an email, at this point, the estimates of the amount of sulfur dioxide emitted by the Hunga-Tonga eruption is a small fraction of what was estimated by Mount Pinatubo. Because of that, I would not expect to see a significant global surface temperature response. Even Pinatubo's aerosols only had short-term effect, for about a year or two, which means the volcano is certainly not going to buy humans time in their battle against climate change. Plume has already spread over Australia,
and beyond has passed over mostly and is now heading for eastern shore of Africa. There have been volcanoes in the past that caused basically a nuclear winter. The next winter was just like forever. It took like 2 years. It was like a long winter. The year without summer. It was, some of them are called. The Toba super eruption 72,000 years ago or so. You know, that was a pretty good example, but I mean, no one really remembers that. 1159 BCE is suspected. The late Bronze Age collapse was probably collapsed because of volcanic eruptions. We also know that Crete, the Minoan civilization, we don't really know who they were. We know they had a king named King Minos. So they were called the Minoans, but we suspect that their civilization was destroyed by a supervolcano. In 536, there was a volcanic winter also. This is supposedly from the eruption of a caldera in central El Salvador. So already there's 4 examples I've given you. In 1257, there was one in Indonesia that triggered a volcanic winter. 1315 to 1317, the Great Famine in Europe may have been precipitated by a volcanic eruption. Mount Tarawewa in New Zealand, the effects which lasted 5 years. 1452 or 1453, sometimes you see these pictures in 1600 as well from people skating on the Thames River in England. These would be examples of these apocalyptic volcanic eruptions. Nuclear winters are made mini ice ages. People skating all over the place, man. The Haya Napatina in Peru exploded in 1600. Tree ring studies show that 1601 was very cold. Wine harvest was late in 1601 in France, and in Peru and Germany, wine production collapsed. Peach trees bloom late in China, and Lake Suwa in Japan froze early. 1783,
1815, the Mount Tambira eruption.
probably the biggest one in human history that we're cognitive of. Bam! Produced the year without summer. 1883, Krakatoa, certainly. Pinatubo, certainly. So we have effects that have been measured, and we can see when we look at the graphs, these years were really cold after volcano. I don't think that's what's going to happen with this one. Extremely large blast beyond any nuclear bomb that's ever been blown up. Probably not enough to, change the effects of climate change. We're screwed, humans. You did it. You did it now. So nothing on climate change, but what about sunsets? Well, sort of from what I can find on my weather apps, inconclusive. Inconclusive so far, at least. Because they're measuring things in the lower atmosphere, things that would be weather. Well, the thing is, this explosion projected stuff so far up and out that it's reached into upper levels of atmosphere, which are well above where the weather is, right? So I need to find some kind of a thing that will show me where that is in, the atmosphere, man.
Just take a look at windy.com and you see global weather right now. Now have a look at where dust mass is. Lots of dust in the air. See, some of that was up over the past few days, was in British Columbia. Now it's kind of moved off the coast. Dust off the California coast. Dust all through mid-Pacific near the equator. CO concentration, carbon dioxide, lots in China, lots in California, a little bit in British Columbia, a little bit in Australia, lots in India. Now look at sulfur dioxide. And you see exactly where the Hunga-Ha'pai volcano blew off north of New Zealand. That wind shifted most of that mass over Australia, produced stunning sunsets. This was a video that was shown on weatherbug.com, and it's of Australia's crazy sunset a few days after the Tonga eruption. And it's eerily similar and familiar to some of the things I've been seeing in BC in everyone's photos and with my own eyes this week. So that does make me think a little bit that maybe this fine particulate is a little bit in the atmosphere, at least here in BC. That sulfur dioxide now heading over to the coast of Africa. That main cloud, other bits of it washed over to South America and up along the US coast. Some of that may be California pollution as well. In the highest atmosphere, are we seeing some of that particulate? More likely than not. Definitely not what's available out there, though. I would mostly call that inconclusive so far. Let's see where it's going to go over the next few days. The majority of that sulfur dioxide cloud has left Australia, but some still lingers along in the western parts. Definitely some of it still in the air around the volcano itself. north of New Zealand. Definitely some of that washing over south of Hawaii, moving towards the Mexican coast. We see lots in the air from Asia coming towards BC as well. So some of those sunsets we saw may be from fine particulates from Hunga-Tonga volcano. Some of it may be from human pollution. Some of that may have just been an effect of the kind of weather that was coming in too, that allowed the sunlight to bounce off and would have given a beautiful sunset more likely than not. Definitely Tuesday, look for nice sunsets in southern BC and along the coast. The effect on climate, negligible, especially in the northern hemisphere, especially with climate change pushing against it. The effect on sunsets, well, inconclusive, but more likely than not playing some effect. I would say in the coming weeks that you want to be maybe looking for some of these sunsets. There may be more of this. So if you like to subscribe to my channel, there's a little thing down there that says subscribe, and if you hit it, you subscribe. And I like it when you subscribe, and subscribe, and if subscribe, and subscribe. And I was saying to him subscribe the other day, and subscribe. And he said subscribe back, and we're subscribing around. Please subscribe. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Bye now.